So Georgina, the list that you have in front of you, the kind of the output from the work that
you mean the oracle.
The oracle, absolutely. So if what's the kind of almost like the extent of that, in the sense, if you look at one end, you might have fully outsourced and fully, how many different category definitions have you got in there roughly? Because what you were talking about in terms of the different capacity, you've got to understand all of the options, really, haven't you?
Yes, I'm counting them actually now. It would be really helpful, Dougal, if we just put numbers on here. So perhaps we can just so we've got there's 6, I think, if my mathematics are right, legal classifications of workers that we've referred to. So we've got self-employed, we've got worker, we've got agency worker, employee, but then we've got categories within each of those. So under self-employed, you've got PSC, sole trader, freelancer, independent worker. So there's a number of different things, but what we've really tried to do is bucket them under one legal classification where we can. Now, there will be notably different contracting mechanisms and or payroll mechanisms and ways of working that you need to adopt for each of them, but it's about trying to make this as simple and straightforward as possible to explain to a stakeholder when frankly all they're focused on is getting somebody in the door to get the work done in the most efficient way. So that they've been designed based on tax and legal classifications because that's the easiest and most succinct way to do it. Some of your listeners might have a different approach, and I'm sure we'd be keen to hear from them about the way that they would potentially split this. But this is intended to be a guide. It's terminology that we want to consistently use within the co-op and guides the intelligent buying decision. That's what it's there to do. It doesn't say anything about what we might need to put into a contract. It doesn't talk about what benchmark rates we might be wanting to use for each of these individual classifications. I mean, you could create a monster, but what we were really trying to do was make it simple and have something that was meaningful, meant that we understood the risks, the pros, the cons, in order to keep ourselves compliant, and then find some, call it low-hanging fruit, call it cost opportunity, whatever that is, to unpick some misclassification. And as I said, we're not there. We're finding misclassification or inaccurate contracting mechanisms in lots of different areas, and hopefully over time we'll start to address each and every one of them.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the scope of it, I think starting with like clear legal definitions or compliance and tax, black and white definitions is a great place to start to build that framework out. And then you have kind of like these sub frameworks underneath it as things expand. I mean, it's like, we talked about people's understanding and where there's a clear classification of like a freelancer, for example. I remember doing some round tables at one of the SIA summits a few times, talking to people about freelancers. And I don't think I got the same definition from, any of the groups of 10 people that were sat on a table each time. It's there's a lot of variance in how people would describe stuff, use of different terminology, different levels of understanding. But I think,
well, now you've got a handy guide now, Johnny. So you just need to download the guide we produced. Yes, exactly.
Well, there you go. There you go. But if you look across all of these channels, they're all ways that an organization could get work done. And Georgina, just a few of them, a couple of them that you've brought up today, like the bench side of it and the kind of build, train and deploy. I probably got that phrase wrong, Dougal, apologies for that. There's a lot available there. But smart organizations need to be aware that there are these different channels available, and they need to know how to utilize them all in the right way. And that has different implications, as you said, from a point of view of contracting, from the risk and compliance side of it, in terms of how you cost it out, how you work out, return on investment, all that sort of thing. So you need if you've got a strategy for all channels and that business is fit for purpose and is in a great position to compete, where for those that aren't, that can't even understand what they've got to work with, let alone have a strategy for them, they're going to be way, way behind. So I think it's crucial. But you mentioned earlier about the decision tree and trying to keep that simple and taking it through into flows that people can just actually utilize. That's got to be quite a critical part of it, really, I would assume.
Yeah, it underpins a conversation. So right now it's a decision tree that's conversation led, and then there's a helpful reference to our SharePoint guide where somebody in my team who's brilliant at the process mapping software has been able to create some sort of yes no questions, and it spits out a number of different channels. But right now we're still learning about what the organization really needs. And you talked about a couple of channels there. You know, we can't get away from the fact that the apprenticeship schemes that are brilliant and Co-op, you know, have anything between 1,000 plus apprentices on program at any given time. The programs such as Kickstart, which are really brilliant. It doesn't feel right to call them sources, but that's the reality. They're just other options to get work done, and it's about helping our stakeholders think all of those different things through when they start to have a buying decision. And you know, when I started in the organization quite a few years ago now, the only conversation was I need to recruit a permanent person in this role. And then we started to think about fixed term and secondees, and then wow, we talked about grads. So over time our organization has become slightly more mature around the different sourcing options or the channels to hire or engage skills and capabilities, and that kind of classification gets bigger and bigger, and the decision tree gets bigger and bigger. But we do have a decision tree. It's not perfect, and sometimes you get to the end of the decision tree and think, oh gosh, you know, we need to go back round that loop because we're not really sure whether the outcome we've got to is the right one. But the more scenario mapping that we can do that shows, you know, the cost variance between operating with a service provider, a temp, a recruit, train, deploy partner is something that we're doing on a regular basis. So it gives users a tangible evidence point and a starting point to be able to link to. And what we're also looking to do is create case studies where people have utilized different sourcing channels and mechanisms and found them really valuable. So we pop them on our SharePoint site as well. So if you're thinking about engaging an apprentice, or you're thinking about operating through an SOW on a fixed price basis, here's an example of what great looks like. So that's what we would like to start to build out over the course of the next 12 months.